Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the opening keynote of AI in Libraries 2, More Applications, Implications, and Possibilities. This is the continuation of last month's event. We've had over 16,000 signups for the two events in total, and we've had the pleasure of Ray Pun being elected the president-elect of the ALA in the meantime, so this should be a very fun session. Welcome, Ray. Welcome, Helen and Thomas.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve, for putting this together and coordinating. And really, it's so good to see everyone here. Thank you, Helen and Thomas, for making time to chat today. I see so many folks sharing out. They're coming in from New Zealand to Croatia to Canada and all different parts of the United States and the world. So thank you for joining in today. Really love to see where folks are coming from. So feel free to share in the chat as we're going to proceed here. So this is the virtual keynote, this opening discussion, and my name is Ray Pun. My pronouns are he and him, and I am the academic and research librarian at the Alder Graduate School of Education, which is located in California. And with me today are two very distinguished practitioners, experts in their domains, and wonderful people. We have Helen Wong Smith, who is the president of the Society of American Archivists, known as SAA, and the archivist for university records at University of Hawaii at Manoa. And then we also have Thomas Padilla, who is with us here, Deputy Director of Archiving and Data Services at the Internet Archive. So welcome, Thomas and Helen. Really delighted to have you both talk about archives and AI, because we hear a lot about libraries, but what about like archives, right? The special collections, that part, whether that's something we collect and realize that maybe there are some opportunities or considerations. So let's have this conversation here. So we are going to ask this first question, which is, what are you both seeing when it comes to AI and archives in the professional landscape? And then we'll start off with Helen.
Mahalo, Ray. So there's no denying about the integration of AI into the archival profession, that it offers promising opportunities for efficiency, accessibility, insights derived from archival collections. However, it also presents challenges that require careful consideration and management, including issues related to quality, ethics, privacy, professional adaptation. Those are things that archivists are very sensitive to. So as the archival profession continues to evolve, and we are evolving, it is crucial that we engage in ongoing dialogue, research and training to navigate the complexities and potential of AI responsibly and effectively. So we acknowledge that AI should be developed competently and efficiently while maintaining the nature and trustworthiness of the records. Possibilities are paramount. For instance, large language models like AfroLid, multilingual, OCR, layout analysis, voice technologies that can, substitute curse words or derogatory words. Those are all increasing access through AI-generated metadata. So, for instance, there's the concern of AI hallucination. It's a phenomenon wherein a large language model often generates, with generative AI, a tool, perceives patterns or objects that are non-existent or inseparable to human observers, and that they create outputs that are nonsensical or altogether inaccurate. I like Dr. Patricia Frank's and others' support for the adoption of paradata, which is necessary to ensure the AI process is captured in a way that preserves the characteristics of authoritative records, authentically reliable, with reliability, integrity, and usability. And if that's a new term for you, as it was for me recently, paradata is defined as information about the procedures and tools used to create and process information resources, along with the information about the persons carrying out those procedures. And I think that that is something that we have often ignored. Who is it that is creating these procedures? And because of that, paradata uncovers opaque technology processes underlying the production of other data sets and at a granular level that must be identified and preserved to delineate the boundaries between the human and the system agency in a semi-autonomous system. So this is my view of the landscape. Mahalo.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. What about you, Thomas? What are you seeing?
Thank you. Some things that I'm seeing, I guess one, I would qualify, since I'm noticing that this is such an international event in terms of participation. So I do want to qualify and say that most of the perspective that I share today will be based on sort of observations of the landscape as I'm seeing it primarily in the United States. But I'm hoping that some of what I'm seeing is useful or aligns with some of what you're seeing, where you are. One thing that I'm seeing is a fair amount of senior leader engagement in the potential of AI in libraries and archives. One of the things that comes to mind is the recent ACRL, Association of Research Libraries, and Coalition for Networked Information Task Force focused on scenarios planning for artificial intelligence in libraries, archives, and special collections. Quite high level, future-oriented thinking. I think that it's great that AI has captured the attention of senior leadership, but I think that the activity needs to be joined from multiple levels of an organization. We need more frontline experience that needs to be centered in considering the potential of this technology, both the challenges and limitations and the practicalities. And I'm encouraged by things like the ACRL AI Competencies Task Force, which has a call out currently, and also just the program for this very conference. I'm seeing lots of voices represented in this conversation that I hope continue to have platform. Aside from that, or beyond that, I'm somewhat concerned about additional for-profit capture of library and archives work. I don't really feel that we benefit from constantly referencing product names and associated marketing language when talking about the future of the profession. For example, it's controversial, I'm finding, but I don't necessarily believe that prompt engineering for XYZ product is a particularly generative path for us. I think in the past, we didn't hire quote unquote, Google librarians or search engine librarians in mass. And I think we are better for it. I think we found a more sort of generative, higher level frame for the value that we could offer. And it just happened to be the case that search was part of that. So those are a couple of things that I'm seeing at the moment.
Yeah, it's really interesting just to hear some of your observations and concerns from both of you. And so let's move on to this other question, which is looking at the usage of these tools regarding how we consider archival processing and ethical framework. So we may not always agree what is or is not ethical. I think it's often one that requires a lot of good discussion and framing of it. But what are your thoughts about using these tools for archival processing and considering ethical framework? So Helen, you mentioned a little bit briefly about this, but curious to hear your thoughts more. And so we'll pass it over to Thomas.
Sure. So I think it's a challenging moment for ethics and doing the right thing. I came into this particular kind of work being particularly inspired by Sophia Noble's work on algorithms of repression. And I found over time that, critics of her work will sometimes say things like, what do you expect? You throw society into an algorithm and it expresses biases. And I think that these same critics, they typically end the argument there feeling safe in the comfort of whatever privilege they have in the world to basically say, it is what it is. And many of us know that it is what it is a condition that is not equally experienced depending on identity, history, and other structural conditions. I think that we must proactively respond, and it's often the case that we're doing that in a reparative posture to inequity and our potential role in exacerbating it. In work that I did at OCLC Research a few years ago, that culminated in a report called Responsible Operations, I suggested that we should invest time into an activity called managing bias or bias management. And the thinking at the time was that no matter what choice you're making, say an archival description, whether AI assisted or not, you were making a choice to implement a kind of subjectivity, and that the subjectivity is not bad in of itself, so long as it's anchored in a consistent set of values that center human rights and advance historical understanding. So I'm hopeful that that focus gets paired with regulation in the United States to provide some additional clarity. Though in the US, historically, we've been less inclined to regulation than other national or even multinational markets. But I do think that that regulation is going to be quite important because in the US, at least, we often operate in what some would refer to as a neoliberal environment, where a lot of the decision-making around sort of moral regulation is highly individualized. And so you have a lot of people trying to do the right thing with respect to the ethical questions. And it kind of becomes, I think, sometimes like this I'm Spartacus moment, where someone says like, I'm Spartacus, no, I'm Spartacus, I have the values, or I have the statement, or I have the principles. And I think those things are all quite well intentioned and good and needed, but they do need a backbone and an overarching framework of regulation to ensure some consistency around sort of the ethical approaches to this work.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Really insightful about regulation in the United States and potentially what that could look like, right? And in terms of different parts around the world, many folks coming in from all over the world. So maybe there's something that your country's exploring and whatnot. What about you, Helen? What are your thoughts?
I want to suggest ditto. There is a Hawaiian proverb that all knowledge is not from one school. And so that is, how I go about addressing any kind of new technology or new platform. Because archivists are entrusted with stewarding society's collective memory, and we are working hard at being more inclusive of these memories. Our obligation is to navigate the ethical complexities and challenges presented by AI. Regarding the aforementioned AI-generated metadata, perpetuation of the biases and erroneous data. And I've seen this occur even before AI. So, that's the problem with AI, is that it's going to perpetuate these types of misconceptions that were previously articulated. So these, for instance, in a scenario, a perceived scenario or people within an image. So when you consider generative AI, which is a subset of AI, is trained to produce new content, either randomly or based on prompts provided by the users, these can be equally biased and incorrect. And that's what scares me, I think, the most, and that what we need to be very vigilant about. A way to address this is codified record-keeping practices of creators using AI to generate images. This is by, and then Jessica Bushy wrote this just this year, AI-generated images as an emergent record format. So there are tools for us to look at. These and other approaches and activities that focus on contextual information that contribute to the creation and the use of AI-generated images as trustworthy records must be required. We have to follow, like Thomas said, there are structures, there are guidelines. Do we need more? Yes, absolutely. This would include paradata, is about the information about the procedure and the tools used to create the process and information resources, along with the information about persons carrying out those procedures. I think that is a level that we have not investigated previously. And so I really advocate that. So you are not just documenting which tools you use, but why and how and what effect was a given tool used in a particular context.
I wanted to follow up on that, Helen. So Thomas mentioned ACRL, the Association of College Research Libraries, ARL, Association Research Libraries, and some works within the association. Is there something SAA is looking into or having discussed?
I was very sad we have started, very preliminary. And one of the first statements was AI as far as submissions to our journal. That was the most. And then when I looked in our online dictionary thesaurus, we don't even have paradata in there. So I'm going to recommend that. So I think that it's, and Kate Thornhill did write an excellent review regarding generative AI and as a more connectivity, more technology. So there are some, just the beginnings of considering its implications, but not any best practices or guidelines yet.
Right, not yet. So let's shift gears here and talk about born digital archives. I think that's something that we're thinking a lot regarding so much information's online and thinking about the nature of these materials. How do we see AI making these born digital collections more accessible and usable? What are the barriers to implement them? And maybe we'll start with Helen.
So, of course, we all recognize that AI can increase accessibility by automating metadata creation, content classification, natural language processing, image recognition, although, I have my caveats on that one, and enhanced search capabilities. But I would rely on the barriers that were articulated by Moises Rockenbach, that we lack knowledge or competencies in the archival profession. We need to really step up our game. We lack reliable technologies that I would include interoperability requirement is often missing. It is not currently integrated into our content management systems, I would say, or if they are, I'm not aware of them. And then there's a lack of economic, of course, and personnel expertise. I would add that data privacy and security and the ethical concerns, the cultural sensitivity are barriers as well. So in addressing these barriers, it's crucial for institutions to develop a comprehensive strategy that considers the specific needs and challenges of their born digital collections. Collaboration with experts, ongoing training, a focus on ethical considerations can help in successfully implementing AI technologies to improve that accessibility and usability. I think I'm more prone to approach the accessibility and usability side of things before I am with the other parts of it as well.
Thanks for sharing that. Thomas?
So my example is going to be about the physical stuff, but then I think debatably will become a born digital sort of question. So one area that I'm particularly interested in is in trying to address access issues for backlogs of materials that staff or organizations don't have the resources to describe. When I worked at the Center for Research Libraries, representatives from member libraries would describe these situations where they have these backlogs of materials in quote unquote less commonly known languages. And that even when they actually had the financial means to hire someone with the language skills to catalog those materials so that they would be discoverable and then lendable, they were not able to succeed in hiring people with those language skills. And from what I gathered, this is a situation that's not uncommon across many collections, big backlogs. And I really honed in on this language barrier issue, partially because it's kind of I think of it as a violation of a preservation maxim that I heard from the late Jerome McDonough at the University of Illinois, where he said, Thomas, there's no preservation without use. And, in the case of these collections, it's like they're literally just sitting there. They're not even described at the level that they can even be discoverable in a catalog. I would think that we would need to do some minimal digitization of some of the backlog materials and then leverage some of the advances in AI that are being made for world languages by companies like Meta, and to see if there's a way that we could find a way to draft behind some of the technical development that they're doing, so that we could deliver on our access and preservation mission.
Great, thanks for sharing that. We're going to move on to our next question here. Depending on how it is, it might be our final one. This is really a teaser, or if you will, like an appetizer, because there's a lot of great sessions right after. We want folks to be able to attend. So we're seeing in the chat, a lot of people are sharing they're feeling overwhelmed, so many information out there. Certainly, I think we all experience that to certain degrees. So how are you both staying on top of AI and libraries and archives, these issues? What resources are you looking into or do you recommend? We'll start with Thomas.
Yeah, the overwhelm is real. I think, part of what I try and do is take a more utilitarian approach to AI as a tool and, find some comfort or refuge in the history of our profession and the values as they've developed, especially over, the latter half of the 20th century. I think that should provide some foundation to not get too overwhelmed and not too mystified by, release after release after release of like this model with this many billions of this, and all these superlatives that, at the end of the day, I think are often a distraction. It's really about what you're doing with these things. But, practically speaking, how do I stay on top of these things besides sort of the philosophical grounding? With careful curation, I think that LinkedIn has become a good source of what is happening in the field. Twitter isn't what it used to be, but occasionally when I grab what I think of as a creepy crawly shoebox from my digital shelf, there can be good things in there. And I also maintain a set of curated Google alerts that send me a digest report of matched results from the broader internet. For example, things related to AI in libraries or AI in archives or AI in regulation.
And just a quick follow-up, Thomas, do you actually have a chance to go through all the Google alerts? I mean, it's probably a lot, right? Every day.
No, I don't have a chance to go through all of them. And they're curatorial decisions. You could be more fine-grained in sort of your Boolean operators and things like that in the Google alerts, so you get a more curated view.
Great, thanks for the tip. And how about you, Helen? How are you staying on top of it, or what resources do you recommend?
I recommend, and I put it in the chat, InterParis Trust AI. This is a multinational interdisciplinary project aiming to design, develop, and leverage artificial intelligence to support the ongoing availability and accessibility of trustworthy public records. They recently had their conference here in Honolulu, and so we go to their website, their presentations are there. What I like about that is that their goals are to identify specific AI technologies that can address critical records and archive challenges, just for focusing in, because that's what I'm all about. Determine the benefits and risks of using AI technologies on the records and archives, and to ensure that archival concepts and principles inform the development of responsible AI. I think that is something that archivists, we have to look at it from that flipped point of view as well. And then to validate outcomes from the third objective with case studies and demonstrations. And I think that they have done an excellent job of that. And I encourage everyone to take a look at their website, which is very transparent, very open access.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Helen. And some folks are commenting in the chat box here. I just wanted to say that as the technology is evolving constantly, so is our conversations, right? There's going to be more of these that you're seeing. So we really want to acknowledge and thank so many of you for making time today to watch and hear some thoughts and conversations. I really want to extend my thanks to Helen Wong Smith and Thomas Padilla for joining us briefly and sharing some of their thoughts and insights and observations. And hopefully it resonates with several of you out there watching, and hopefully we'll get into some sort of opportunity for you to think about in your profession, in your workplace. And so with that, I also wanted to mention that there are several sessions coming up during this half hour, and that the closing keynote will be led by Reed Hepler from the College of Southern Idaho. So hopefully you'll make time for that at the end, and there's the recording. But again, thank you all so much for making time, for speaking with us. We want to give you that 5 minutes in between the sessions, because I know a lot of people got to prepare or go to those rooms. So thank you all again for making time for today's Library 2.0 AI and Libraries, Part 2.
Mahalo for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Aloha.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Thomas. Thanks, everybody. Recordings will be posted by Monday. We do include the chat, so don't worry if you missed something in the chat, it will get posted with the recordings. And we have the recordings from last month's conference, which are all at library20.com or the Library 2.0 YouTube channel. Take care now. Bye.